After 10 years of undercover work, leading 70 plus undercover child rescue missions in 15 countries, I realized that the problem was bigger today than it was 10 years ago. This is the moment that changed my life. He went in the house where the children are. He was there for about 10 minutes, and we could hear some of the children cry. They were so scared of coming out and meeting the men who were supposed to die. Pretty soon they came out and they had 4 virgins. They had 3 little girls and 1 little boy. This little boy was 11. He was taken from Haiti. He was given cocaine that morning because he was so scared it was going to hurt.
I don't know, Paul. Every conversation I've ever had in my life, this has got to be, I can't, it blows your mind. I can't even imagine. I don't know if I could have done what you've done.
But at that point, the Child Protective Services people were in with the children, and to calm them down, they were laughing and singing with the children. And compared to the crying I heard half an hour before, that laughing and singing, that sound of freedom was the most beautiful sound that I ever heard.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end. As always, my friends, all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving goes to our God for that, because he deserves it. He's our God. I have a very interesting guest today. He's a billionaire. His name is Paul Hutchinson. Very, very successful guy. As a matter of fact, I'm going to read some of his business accomplishments. I'm sure you'll be impressed with that. But there's more to it. The reason I have Paul on here, because he has done major work in rescuing children that were involved in human trafficking. You saw the movie Sound of Freedom. If you didn't, you need to go see it with Caviezel. He starred in it. It was a great movie. It was a movie that was shunned by all the studios. Nobody wanted to distribute it. Nobody wanted to touch it. And then Angel Studio, a Christian-based studio, took it over, became a huge hit. Terrific. It's a tearjerker. You cried through it when you see what they did to these kids, the way they human trafficked them. But Paul, very interesting, because Paul was one of the major financiers of the film, number one. And number two, he was one of the people that they featured. He didn't act in it, but it was his character that rescued a bunch of these kids. Unbelievable story. I want to read some of his credits. This is a very successful guy. He founded 15 companies throughout his entrepreneurial career. One of them he co-founded, Bridge Investment Group, a private equity real estate firm with over $10 billion in assets under management and 1,000 plus employees. All that stuff. He retired back in 2017. He made many lucrative exits. When he had his business, he exited it for a big, number. But here's some of his accomplishments, his philanthropic and child rescue work. He founded the Child Liberation Foundation in 2017. He led or played critical roles, listen to this, in over 70 undercover rescue missions in about 15 countries. He did it himself. He led up these undercover missions to rescue these children that were being human trafficked. He helped liberate over 5,000 children throughout his foundation or through his foundation and other organizations that he supports. He worked closely with Operation Underground Railroad on over 40 missions, and he transitioned from active rescue work to advocacy and awareness building after 10 years of undercover operations. This guy, he did it on his own. Something tugged at his heartstrings. He was contacted at some point. I'm going to let him tell you the story, but he really has a heart for these kids like we all should have, and he was in a position to really help rescue these young kids that were human trafficked. What a horrible thing. And he's going to tell you something that is going to make you sick. It really is. There's so many elite people in this world, powerful people, how they deal in human trafficking and escapades with these young kids. We've seen it in the movie. It's disgusting. It's immoral and it's demonic. And Paul's going to get into it, and he's going to tell you, got to listen to this interview and listen to it all the way through. I'm telling you, because for those of you who have children, he's going to tell you some shocking things that might be taking place in your own area. Listen up to him, very important. Again, the movie, The Sound of Freedom. He also now wrote a book, The Sound of Freedom, it will be more comprehensive and complete than the movie itself. Paul is a very established guy, very well-connected guy. self-made billionaire, and he was really a pleasure to talk to. You're going to enjoy it. It's going to get you upset, guaranteed. I think human trafficking of children, it's one of the worst things ever. It really turns your stomach just to even think about it. But listen to what Paul has to say with no further delay. My special guest, Paul Hutchinson. Paul, pleasure meeting you. Thank you for taking the trip. I know you came all the way in from Colombia. I appreciate that. And I gave you an introduction that you certainly deserve. It's an amazing career that you've had, and I really appreciate you coming by.
Well, thank you, Michael. Incredibly grateful to spend time with you and your audience.
Thank you. And I want to start out with, I want to ask you one question about Epstein that everybody wants to know. Do you ever think that we will get the files really released, unredacted, the real files, everything that supposedly exists on Epstein?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. You know why? Here's the thing.
I assume.
Here's the thing. If you were an entity, I won't say if it's a 3-letter entity or if it's a ancient family entity, whatever. If you're an entity that wanted full control, you wanted to control the votes of a senator, of a congressman, of a judge, or you wanted to control the money of a billionaire, or you wanted to control some royalty. If you wanted that level of control, you get them on film with a 12-year-old. You control them forever. You really do. And that's really what it's about. It's about blackmail. And the CIA's book of dirty tricks has blackmail written all over it. That's really what the whole program was about from the beginning. And if we think that even our 3-letter agencies are the ones that are in control, we have another thing coming. There are families, there are institutions that are incredibly powerful that have to implement a certain level of control when you get to a place of power. And that is one method that is used. It's something that's used within Hollywood. We see it all over the place with guys who are wanting to be big stars and whatnot. If they can get you at a party, they can get you on film, they can put some level of blackmail on you. Now they can pour the money and the fame and everything else and have you rise to the tops of the tops. And, people say you sold your soul to the devil. So that's true in many cases. It's exactly what happens. Is you see it in gangs where you have to prove your loyalty and you have to do something that now they have that control. It's so that when they raise you up the ranks, they have that blackmail on you. And that's what this whole story is about from the beginning.
But Paul, how could these people in power and authority be so ignorant as not to believe that maybe Epstein had a plot here, or he was filming them, or he was blackmailing them? How could they be so naive?
It was not naive. A lot of them trade their lust for power and money in exchange for us of right. You can have that stuff on me because I know that you're going to give me what I want.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I've seen it.
I mean, to me, that's a real sign of weakness. I mean, you can't get that on your own. You have to rely on somebody else to provide that for you and take a risk like that. Wow.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing too. There was a lot of guys at the Diddy parties that they knew they were being filmed. They knew it. From going into the parties, they knew they were being filmed.
So they had that much confidence in Diddy that he would never do something like that?
It's a trade-off knowing that kind of power, that kind of money, etc., can get me what I want. It happens a lot.
And for 20 years, a guy like Diddy and Epstein can do all of this disgusting stuff, as far as I'm concerned, with minors and get away with it. Nobody investigating them, nobody looking at it. Is that because people in power keep everybody else away? Is that the bottom line?
Well, here's the sad thing, Michael, is this is more pervasive than people, this meaning doing things with minors, right? Is more pervasive than any of us want to believe. You in a healthy, affluent neighborhood in the US, you walk out in your front porch and you look left and you look right. There's a very high chance that one of those homes on your block is a dangerous place for children.
Really?
There's of all the women who are listening to us today, over 40% of them have admitted that they are a victim at some time in their life of abuse. 1/4 of them, it was as a child. So 25% of all the women and that's just the ones that talk about it. Now, with men, it's a little bit less. It's 1 in every 5 at some time in our life. But even then, 1/4 of them, it was under the age of 10 years old in their own homes. This is pervasive, and there are so many people involved that there's too many judges, there's too many prosecutors that have dirt on them as well, that they don't want to be pushed into a position where that can be brought to light. And so, yes, it's happening everywhere. And we, as good Americans, need to stand up and say, no, I'm sick of this crap. And here's the thing. I was a big fan of Will Smith for a long, long time. I'd watch all of his movies until I realized what his wife walked in on him doing in the bedroom, till I realized how many of the P. Diddy parties he was at and what was going on in those parties. And then I had to choose to support him or not support him by choosing to put my money into movies that he was a part of or not. And so it's sad today because me and my wife will be looking, okay, we want to watch a movie tonight. And she'll go through and she'll say, nope, pedo, nope, pedo, nope, pedo. Okay, we'll watch a movie with that guy, right?
Really?
Because there's so many people that are involved that we have to take a step back and say, listen, I'm going to vote with my wallet of what I'm going to support and what I'm not going to support. And that includes politicians, that includes big media, that includes Hollywood, all the way across the board. It's not just the cartel. The biggest dangers in our society, the real bad guys, are the ones that wear 3-piece suits and have a title. Those are the guys because they're doing things with impunity. And they say that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. You see this in some of these ultra elite rings with a level of absolute power that makes them think that they're beyond retribution.
Well, what is it with people in power wanting to deal in child trafficking? And I mean, I never really even thought of this, but why? I have a question for all my friends and followers. Have you tried my wine yet? You know, in the last 2 years, we've made tremendous progress with Franzese wine, and it's really all thanks to your support, and obviously because people are finding out we have a great wine at a great price. In 2025, we aim to become a national brand, and I want all of you to be a part of it. Every bottle you buy, every story you share builds more than a brand. It fuels a movement. The story of our wine is one of people having second chances and of lives being transformed. That's the truth. So go to my website, franzesewine.com, and get your bottle today. Salud, my friends.
There's something to be said for unbridled greed, arrogance, and lust. And when you've already done it all, when you've already effed all these projects, when you've already had the money and you've got all these things, then what's next? What's next?
I know, but Paul, you're a very successful guy, but this doesn't come. You're doing
close.
Just the opposite.
Exactly.
You're trying to help these people.
Well, and what happens is 1 out of every 3 men who have been abused as children, if not given the help, the love, the healing that they need, become contact offenders. Now, the majority of us turn out to be protectors. Most of my undercover operators have been victims themselves as children. And they grow up saying, no, I'm going to be a protector. There's no way I'm ever going to allow a child to go through what I went through. However, if 1 in every 5 men have dealt with that kind of trauma, and 1/4 of them under the age of 10 years old in their own homes, and 1/3 of them end up becoming an abuser in physical, verbal, or sexual abuse of a child, then, and the numbers of those aren't just 1 or 2. The averages are more than 10. In fact, some upwards of 70 victims in their lifetime. And so this is generational trauma. And in fact, after 10 years of undercover work, leading 70 plus undercover child rescue missions in 15 countries, I realized that the problem was bigger today than it was 10 years ago. And I asked myself, I said, Paul, it says, if your goal 10 years ago was to eradicate this evil from the face of the earth, you're not doing a very good job, because there's more today than everywhere. And I had to take a look at it and ask myself, where the hell is this coming from?
Mm.
Why is there such a demand that every time we pull 20 children out of hell, another 20 or 30 more were being sucked back into the deepest recesses of hell just to fill the demand? And I found myself wishing every undercover mission, I wish that I could go back 5 or 10 years. And if I had a time machine and I could rescue those kids then, but even then, if we rescued them, more would be brought in. So I thought, okay, what would I do to really fix it? Well, I would sit down with the perpetrator or the trafficker and I would say, what is going on in your life
Hmm.
that makes you think that in any way it's okay to go down that road? And I came to an understanding that most of the traffickers were trafficked themselves as children, and most of the perpetrators were victims themselves as children. Now, don't get me wrong in saying this. You know, some people get all pissed thinking, oh, Paul's a sympathizer. No, I have literally put my life in danger hundreds of times to ensure that they never hurt innocents again.
Were you actually on these undercover
Yeah, I
operations?
led
You
or
them
played a key
yourself?
part in over 70 missions, and we can go into the pit of darkness and talk about that. So,
Yes.
so I have been there. I have seen the darkest part of humanity, but I realized that the only way to fix this problem is to figure out how to heal humanity because it's generational trauma. It is literally hundreds of millions of perpetrators in our neighborhoods that somebody doesn't just go down to Colombia and go try to, have sex with a child. It's likely already been going on in their own families, in their own neighborhoods, and now they're expanding beyond that. And so we need to ask ourselves, do we just take everybody who's dealt with trauma and put them away? No, because the majority of them become protectors.
Mm.
What we need to do is have systems that in their adolescent years and their young adult years, whatever, that we can help them talk about it. We can help them release it so that it never, ever gets to the point where they're passing on that trauma to a child.
But how do you identify if this is going on so pervasively? How do you identify, like you said, one out of I mean, in a neighborhood? There's so many places this could be taking place. How do you identify it? And is it mostly the fathers abusing the children?
It's over 90% of sexual abuse is familial. It's a father, it's an uncle, it's a grandfather, or familial includes people that the family knows and trusts, right? And that's where even more trauma is. When we did the undercover work and we pulled these children out of hell, we knew they were being traumatized and we can immediately get them the help, the loving, the healing that they need. What happens here in the US is, a little girl is being abused by her trusted, loving guardians, her father, her uncle, her neighbor, whatever else, and then is told, keep this secret, don't tell anybody. And then it gets buried. And her entire life, she's holding on to this trauma. Or even the boys, it's even worse with the boys because very few of us as men ever talk about it. We're like, oh, that thing that happened when I was 8 by my uncle. If I talk about that, that's going to make me less of a man. No, it won't. You were 8. That was a horrible thing that happened because of somebody that was holding on to a lot of horrible pain. That child, unfortunately, was the person that had to receive that pain, and you're carrying with it, and just the act of talking about it as a man releases so much of that trauma that the chances of it being passed on go way down to almost nothing. The problem is the average age of somebody talking about their abuse as a child is 52 years old.
Really?
That's my age. I've raised
Wow.
my kids. I've built my career. And if you're holding on to that pain, it's coming out in anxiety and depression and PTSD and addictions and all of these issues in our life that if we can help people release it early enough, we can save millions of children in the future.
I can't, this is so foreign to me. Paul, honestly, it's only been in the last 5 years or so that actually just before the movie, that I started really hearing about this and saying this is a real problem.
Yeah.
It's like I can't even wrap my head around it. It's just disgusting.
Just because good people can't even imagine
No.
that that's a thing. I grew up in a beautiful home. I didn't experience any of this stuff. And when I got a call 11 years ago from our attorney general, and I was a successful business owner, very successful. And we talk about that and why that led to a lot of ego and stuff and why that was detrimental. But I was very successful in my business career. I had billions of dollars under management in my fund at the time. And I had donated massive amounts of money to child related charities. And the attorney general called me and he said, Paul, he said, I know you're very involved with a lot of child related charities. He said, I need to talk to you about something that's pretty dark. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, and good people don't even know that it's happening. And he started talking about trafficking and child trafficking and the reasons why the children were being trafficked. And I could not fathom it. Could not fathom it.
Well, let me ask you this. And, allegedly 300,000 children crossed the border during the Biden administration. They were lost. We don't know where they are. Do you think it's human trafficking?
Oh, absolutely.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. Here's the thing. I've spent, especially since the time of the movie came out, I've spent enormous amounts of time in South America. And every single day for the last few years, I've spent a huge amount of time in Latin America. And especially over the 4 years of the Biden administration, every single day, there were children that were taken in every major city throughout Latin America. Children were being taken from healthy families. Now, I didn't say wealthy families. They're quite poor, but they have a mom and a dad and a loving home, right? They don't have the resources to be able to follow up and figure out where their kids went.
When you say taken, not kidnapped.
No, they were
given.
They were, some of them, many were taken, right?
Just taken out of the home.
Happens all the time down there, but we don't hear about it because it's not an affluent family with a nice home and whatnot. And it happens a lot. And what happens, just like what we showed in the Sound of Freedom movie, where this little boy is, you don't want something bad to happen to your sister. Do you? What happens is these children were drugged. They were then told, listen, I know where your mother lives. I know where your sister goes to school. You don't want something bad to happen to them, do you? And literally within a week of them taken, these kids are completely compliant. Happens all the time. And then they're taken up to the border. They're given a phone number and an address, and they're told, listen, this is your new sponsor. If you get sent somewhere else, you have to run away. You have to go to this home. And the traffickers realized that it was a lot easier to take the supply to the demand. The United States is the number one producer and consumer of child pornography in the world. In the world, right? And we're the ones that are consuming, because when you're consuming child pornography, it doesn't end there. Pretty soon these guys are fantasizing about things they wouldn't have thought was attractive 5 years ago, and then they're acting out on these horrific fantasies. This is creating a tsunami of demand, and so these traffickers are bringing them up. And 2 years ago, the State Department admitted that they had completely lost 85,000 children. And then that number got increased by another almost 300,000 that they didn't have tabs on. And the reason behind it is because they were being brought across. There was 130,000 children a year that were undocumented, unaccompanied minors that were being brought across the border. Now, if you really want to know what real immigration looks like, you look at what's happening in war-torn countries. You've got a mom and a dad and some children that are coming across. You weren't seeing that. You were seeing hundreds of thousands of children that were coming across. The fact that there was hundreds of thousands of children that came across without parents, that's telling you that something really wrong was going on. And so, yes, I absolutely will hang that on Kamala, on the Biden administration, as the border czar, is what she was, because of the fact it was. And here's the thing. The border situation should have never been a political issue. It should have never been. This isn't about a right or left thing. This is about a human trafficking issue. And it was insane how much of that came across the border.
Well, Paul, as a Christian, I can only say this is demonic. I mean, this is really demonic. But what is the process? In other words, there is a group of people out there that will take a child, and then they got to bring them to the border. Does somebody pick them up on the other side of the border?
Well, they have a phone number and an address that aren't having an FBI background check. They didn't have any.
In other words, a phone and an address here that they have
here in the United States.
They're given that.
Yeah, and you'll find reports of good families who say, listen, we want to help these kids that are coming across. And so there's entire communities where they all agreed to take a bunch of these kids, and over 80 to 90% of these kids ran away from those homes within a couple weeks. Why? Because they weren't placed in the place that they were supposed to be placed, quote unquote, by the traffickers.
And do the kids just know to run away, or
They were told, you don't want something bad to happen to your sister, do you?
you got to leave?
Yeah, you've got to get in this situation. This is what you're going to do to protect your family. Now, I'm not saying that happens with all of them, but the system was set up in a way that made it very easy for the traffickers to be able to push these kids into very dangerous places here in the U.S. to fulfill horrific demands.
Wow. Let me ask you this. Recently, Kash Patel, who I happen to like, I really do, and Dan Bongino, who I happen to know, and I have a lot of respect for Dan, they said that they went over all the information about the Epstein. I have to tell you this, and I believe that they're being honest about what they saw in the investigation. I just don't believe the investigation was accurate because, Paul, I was in that exact same tier, in the exact same cell. I spent 29 months and 7 days in solitary. There was no way I could have committed suicide. No way. So I believe something bad happened there.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know why they're saying, I think, again, I think Dan Bongino is an honest guy and I like Kash Patel. And if they're looking at the investigation and say, these are the results, I'm saying, why aren't you questioning this? It doesn't make sense. And I wish if they can talk to me or so many other guys that have been in that situation, they'll tell you it's not possible to commit. Just not.
No. And I agree. I think that if there are good people that are investigating, the information that's coming in is bad. I mean, I did this in the investment world. The only deals that we lost big money on were ones where all of the documentation was fabricated. Right? It was you can't underwrite fraud, and that's right. We can look at all the information that came in and look at these paperwork and everything else. But if that was all fabricated, then we, as good fund managers at the time, didn't have the ability to see the truth.
Yeah, and it's the same like you said. If we're never going to get to the bottom or see all of the files on Epstein, why should we believe that whatever was investigated or reported is accurate?
Yeah,
we shouldn't. Unbelievable. This is like mind-boggling.
And you and I share a common belief in our connection with Christ, and I truly believe that Ephesians 6:12 rings true in all of this. We are not fighting a battle against flesh and blood. This is against the darkest darkness of the universe. This is against demonic forces. You cannot put a child in that situation and just have it be. This isn't just men that are doing this. This is absolutely the worst thing that anybody can encounter.
I mean, I'll be honest with you too. I heard from a good source about Hillary and Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton too. I didn't even want to believe it. I wouldn't repeat it. I didn't want to believe it, but that she was into this pedophilia also. I don't know if it's true or not, but the more I'm hearing about people in power wanting this just terrible situation, I mean, it's almost you have to believe it.
Yeah. I read a book a few years ago called Pawns in the Game by William.
Pawns in the Game.
Pawns in the Game. William Carr has written almost I think it was early 1900s. He was a high-level military intelligence guy, and he talks about how a lot of this has been put in play for a long, long time by the Luciferian order, and how those people in absolute power have made covenants in that space. And he drops a bomb, and then he proves it on all of these things, step by step of the families that are involved and why they are, et cetera. And so, yeah, this is a battle of light and dark. This is a battle that everyone, as good, conservative, good, God-fearing men and women, have to step forward and say no. If we're going to be that candle on the hill, if we're going to be that light, we have to be a powerful light, because the darkness is stifling, and indeed it is penetrating every part of our lives. And so we need to stand strong. We need to see the divinity within ourselves and other people, and fight this fight. or else it's gonna overrun us.
And how do we do that, Paul? I mean, how do we, people like myself who just, look, I have 7 kids and 7 grandkids right now. I can't even, again, wrap my head around this. How do we get into this battle and help the fight? I wouldn't even know where to begin.
People will leave the movie Sound of Freedom and they'll say, okay, I want to do something. I want to help. I want to go rescue kids. Well, the worst thing you can do is go undercover in Mexico, right? As a regular guy, you're going to get arrested. You're probably going to get shot, right? The best thing you could do is go home and hug your children. And people are like, well, how does hugging my child, what is that going to do? Well, the majority of children that get, especially Americans, that get put into situations like this come from broken homes or runaways or a broken foster care program, wherein they're a lot more vulnerable and it's a lot easier for the traffickers to pull them and take them into a trafficking type situation. In addition to that, you need a relationship with your children where they can very comfortably come to you and say, hey, Dad, hey, Mom, I don't like it. I don't like it when you tell me to hug Uncle Harry because he touches me weird and he tells us we should have secrets outside of you. Or I don't like going to this babysitter house because, she's showing us and tells us we should trust her more than you. Or I don't like this friend's house because her brother is showing us he took pictures of us when we're changing and now says he's going to use them around the school if we don't do other things. These are grooming behaviors. And it's important to understand that many children who are in this situation, even ones who are being sold for these horrible things, sleep in their own beds at night, and their parents don't even know. Many of the undercover missions that we did, these children didn't come. They weren't taken somewhere. They were literally still living at home, but it was their babysitter, it was their uncle, it was their neighbor and whatnot that had some dirt on them already that controlled them in this situation that were selling them. And so, in addition to that, and this is something I'm going to just go down the Christian route just for a quick second. If indeed children are much more vulnerable if they're in a broken home or a runaway or a broken foster care program, the priority for us as families, as husbands, as wives, as mothers, fathers, our priority should be whatever it takes to help keep that family together. Now, sadly, in the United States, 1 out of every 2 marriages ended up in divorce. Now, I'm the pot calling the kettle black here, right? I'm on my 3rd marriage, right? And so finally I figured out how to do it right after 50 years. But if marriages is a 50% divorce rate or higher, 1 in every 2, if I told you could do one thing every day, just one thing with your family that took that from, and it would only take you 2 to 5 minutes maximum, that could take it from 1 in 2 to 1 in 1,000, would you want to know what that one thing was?
Of course.
Here's the crazy thing. So simple. Pray together with your family. It doesn't have to be something crazy. It doesn't, oh, Father art in heaven. It's simply hold your wife's hand before you go to bed and say, hey, God, we're incredibly grateful. Thank you for this beautiful day. Please watch over our kids. And, that one thing takes it from 1 in 2 to 1 in 1,152. It's one of the most crazy studies I've ever seen. Simply coming together to connect with husband and wife and family and talk to your creator. That simple 2 minutes a day takes it from 1 in 2 to over 1 in 1,000.
Wow. That's amazing.
Hug your kids.
What do you say?
Pray with your wife. That's how we fight this thing. Because answer to your question, it's not, how do we, we want to change laws. We want to change policies. We want to create the healing programs for the kids, the adults, etc. Yes, we want to do all of that stuff. But the real key to solving this problem is that connection with your kids, connection with your spouse, and that connection with God.
Amazing. All right, let me ask you this. You didn't all of a sudden wake up one day and say, I want to get involved in human trafficking and help these kids out. How did that happen?
Well, about 11 years ago, I got a phone call from our Attorney General. And he said, Paul, I know you've donated a lot of money to child-related charities. He said, I need to talk to you about something that's pretty dark. The fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. Good people don't know that it's happening.
Was it during Obama?
No, this was the attorney general in Utah.
Oh,
So
in
it was,
Utah.
yeah,
Oh,
it was
okay.
our state attorney
State
general.
attorney general.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he started talking about this operators who were in South America that identified some children. They had identified 50 or 20 children at the time in Cartagena, and they needed about $50,000 to help rescue the kids. I'm like, okay, I can help handle that. I was in a really good place.
Mhm.
I had a very successful company. At one point of my life, I had 2 helicopters. I had a house with 10 bathrooms, 8 private
Mhm.
suites, 3 kitchens, a basketball court in my basement. This was the lifestyle. So, it was all ego me. But yeah, I wanted to help kids with that. I think it
Mhm.
was me feeling guilty for the massive success that I had. So I was helping wherever I could. Well, then,
Let me stop you for a minute. Why
yes,
why are you feeling guilty for the massive success you had when you earned it?
I did earn it. I did earn it. And I'm not feeling guilty. What I'm feeling guilty for is the fact that I had allowed that success to put me in a place of ego and greed
Mhm.
and lust. And we'll talk about that later and when
Okay.
we're talking about how to fix this problem, right?
Okay.
But in every way, I worked my ass off for that success
Mhm.
in every way. I was completely honest all the way through and building the successful companies, and I had 4,000 employees of the company that I had started. It was massively successful. So I wasn't feeling guilty, but I was acting out of integrity with a lot of other areas of my life.
Well, let me tell you, the reason I say that too is because I just don't like when people resent people that earned whatever they made. You worked
Absolutely.
hard, you made it, so you got $1 billion, whatever the money, and people resent that. And you have politicians saying billionaires don't pay their fair share. And my answer to is, well, change the law, do whatever you need to do, and they'll do it. They're legally doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So I just don't like when people are resentful of people that have made it in this country. This is what this country is all about.
Well, and I teach people how to. I have a book that's coming out next year
Hmm.
called Conscious Capitalism or Infinite Wealth that talks about building, teaching people how to build massive wealth
Hmm.
while doing massive good. See,
Mm.
see where people get screwed up in that space is if they think that we live in a zero sum world, right? If they think that in order to make $10 million, you literally have to take $10 million from other people to get so. If you have, and it comes from our definition of economics. I'll just a preview of it. My chapter 1 is of that book is your economics teacher lied to you. Scarcity versus abundance, right?
Mm.
If we think that the definition of economics is the division of scarce resources, it's a fallacy. There's enough resources where everybody can have a beautiful home, everything that they could ever eat, everything they could ever wear. The problem comes if we think that in order to get ahead, other people have to lose. But if you create a true win-win-win across the board, where you could create wealth for yourself while creating wealth for your employees, while creating wealth for humanity as a whole, which is true, that you can create value that lifts everybody together. I'm super happy that Amazon exists today, and there's a whole bunch of millionaires and billionaires because of it. You know
Mhm.
why? Because of how much time it saves me when I can go click, 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 buy, and I don't have to waste half a day going to the store and finding what I want to find.
It's like we're Amazon's best customer here. We get a package or two every day.
Exactly.
But Paul, I'm going to make a deal with you. I want to
Yes.
be the first person to get that book.
I would love to.
Deal?
In fact, I will do that. I'll even give you the one before it goes to the publisher and
That's a
get your
deal.
opinion on it because
Absolutely.
it's such an important principle.
Yes.
And one of the things I talk about in that book that kind of answers that question before of why I got it brought into the child rescue work is I had a mentor in my early 20s that said, Paul, the average person donates 2% of their income to charity.
2%.
Sadly, millionaires donate less than 2%.
Mm.
He said, however, decamillionaires, centimillionaires, and billionaires, the number is much higher. He
Mm.
says, so if you just want to be a millionaire, donate 2%.
Mm.
He said, but if you want to be much bigger, he said, consider 10% or more. He says that the book of Malachi says that literally the windows of heaven will open, that there will not be room enough to receive it. And I'm a witness to that. I made a decision at that time based on that conversation that I would always find charitable things to do with a minimum of 10, 15, even 20% of my money. And you can call it God, you can call it karma, you can call it the universal law of exchange, call it whatever you want to. There's a higher power very interested in us
No,
doing good.
You got to call it God because you're corroborating Scripture.
Exactly.
It's exactly what it
Exactly.
says.
I call it
You can't
God.
outgive God.
Exactly. You can't. You give more and it comes. And I tell people, how does somebody become a partner, let alone a founder of a 20, 30, $40 billion investment fund? You're not a University of Utah dropout, right? That's what I am, right? The statistical probability of me being where I am is zero. The only way that I can understand it is that I made that commitment, that covenant, that promise in my early 20s that I would give until it hurt. In fact, at the time I had that conversation with that mentor, I was earning like $2,000 a month. And I said, well, isn't it better? This is why I want to be wealthy, so I can be charitable. He goes, no. He says, be charitable now when you're earning $2,000 a month, and that road to success will be so much easier. And I remember thinking, wow, I thought I wanted to be successful so that I could be charitable. I didn't realize I should be charitable so that I could be successful in every area of life. And so making that decision early on, now I was very much involved in charities. I remember when I made that decision, I thought, okay, do I just give money to the guy on the side of the street that's asking me for money? And I did. I remember I had a friend that said, Paul, are you really making a difference? I said, you know what? I can't judge. That could have been me if I wasn't in a healthy home. I said, but over time, I realized I was contributing to a welfare mentality problem. So over time, I decided to focus fully on children. I was on the Make-A-Wish board of directors for 7 years. I was the incoming chairman for Make-A-Wish in our area when I got that call from the Attorney General. And so he tells me about child trafficking, tells me about these guys needed some money. So I helped to fund that mission. Then a few weeks later, one of the operators called me and he said, Paul, I'm here in Cartagena. There's not just 20 children here. There's more than 50, and there's more than 100 children in other rings that are tied to these trafficking rings in other cities. He said, we can rescue all of these 100 children on the same day, but I need your help. And I said, well, how much do you need? He said, I need you. Could you be in Colombia in 2 days? He said, the head trafficker has a piece of property he wants to develop into a child brothel resort. He needs a few $1 million to build it out. He believes he can make tens of millions of dollars a year.
But isn't it illegal there? They're allowed to do that?
It's illegal most places in the world.
Yeah.
But
where he wanted to do that?
Well, here's the thing. There are certain countries, and I've been working in Colombia for the last few years and helping to change laws and policies. Here, when I did undercover work in Amsterdam, we couldn't find children for sale. Why? Because prostitution is legal, but it is very controlled, right? Now, I'm not a fan whatsoever of prostitution. It has killed so many families. However, this is what I wrote to the Senate in Colombia. If you are going to legalize it, it has to be controlled, because if it's legal to have prostitution and you don't have the girls checking in and having verification of their ages and stuff, it is wrought for opportunities for traffickers to traffic children without consequence.
Got it.
So,
but where that person was openly wanted to develop this property and put a brothel there, would he have been allowed to do that?
Not allowed to do it, but the authorities would have looked the other way. Yeah, this was an island that he wanted to build it out on, and this was outside of Cartagena. You literally, at the time, you could walk down the street and you'd see police officers over there and over there, and you knew for sure that was a 12-year-old. Without that, and when you see some foreigner come and pick her up, and the police aren't doing anything, it would happen all the time. So fortunately, those things have changed now. Colombia is now the shining example of how policies and law changes can make a huge impact in keeping the children safe.
Just a question, Epstein's Island, was there any jurisdiction over that island at all? Was there any supervision, any control whatsoever?
It's an interesting question. So yes and no, right? They're back at the time, back even 5, 6, 7 years ago, doing my undercover work. If you went to another country or you went to an island or whatever else, and you did something horrible with a 12-year-old, you would have to be prosecuted in that country in order for you to, you would have, the only way to be prosecuted in the US at the time is that we would have to prove that you while in US on US soil made the decision to go to that other country to do that horrible thing with that 12-year-old. Some of our people helped to make changes in the law where now you go anywhere in the world and you end up with a 12-year-old in that situation, you can be prosecuted in the United States, even if you're not prosecuted there, even if the laws of that country don't prosecute. And so it's amazing that has happened, because if you go rob a bank in South America, you can't get arrested and go to jail in the U.S. for robbing a bank down there. You have to be prosecuted in that country. But if you go down there and child, absolutely. The very second you come into the U.S., you can get nailed. Even after you finish your sentence, if they did prosecute you down there, you finish your sentence there, you come to the U.S., you get sentenced again here.
And it doesn't have to be a U.S. person that you abused.
Nope. If you're a U.S. citizen and you go anywhere in the world and abuse a child, you can get prosecuted.
Is that a recent law?
That's within the last 5+ years. So
during Trump?
Huh?
During Trump's administration?
It was during Trump's first administration. Yeah, it for sure wasn't in the last 4 years.
All right. So let me ask you. So now you can rescue 50 children.
Yeah.
And that's what got you.
Yeah. So I said, well, what do I need? He said, well, I have to have somebody who can effectively negotiate this transaction with the traffickers. He said, I can't teach my Navy SEALs how to wear a $50,000 watch and negotiate a multi-million-dollar real estate deal. These guys are going to see through fake money all day long. And what's interesting, at the time I got the call, I was in Atlanta, Georgia. I was at a conference with third-generation billionaire families, and I was raising money for my real estate fund, right? And I said, well, what kind of outfit do I need? And he goes, just come dressed as a wealthy playboy. And I looked down. I have a suit that costs more than my first car, right? I've got this conservative blue on the outside, but it's bright pink on the inside. I had a $50,000 watch. I had cufflinks that were $2,000 cufflinks. I'm like, I think I got the outfit, right? So I jump on a plane, fly to. What was interesting too is,
hey, my friends, a lot of you already know that just a few short months ago, I started my private community. We call it the Franzese family. And I got to be honest, I'm really blessed to see that over 500 people have already become a part of it. You know what they're doing? They're connecting with one another, they're learning, and they're growing together basically every single day. And I'm going to be honest again, it's getting pretty hard for me and my team to give quality time to everyone. That's where family is all about. So don't wait. Take part in growing yourself in the Franzese family, and don't miss both the benefits and the success that come from a real community environment. Go to michaelfranzese.com/family or click the link in the description below to sign up. And I hope to see you all there, because you're going to see a lot of me. I do a lot in that community. It's going to be a legacy piece for me. I just love helping people. So that's an offer you shouldn't refuse, people. See you in there.
Is about an hour later, after I committed to go, my business partner, John Pennington, called me. He was the co-founder of the fund with me. And he said, Paul, I heard through the grapevine what you're planning to do. He said, have you thought through this? He said, you're set. You can retire today, buy an island, be happy the rest of your life. And I said, John, would I really be happy if I bought an island, if I bought a yacht, if I bought another jet? I said, would that make me happy? I said, tell me this. If I was doing something else dangerous tomorrow, if I was climbing Everest tomorrow, you and I would have the same conversation. He said, yeah, we probably would. I said, and when I'm 95 years old and I look back on my life and I say, I climbed this mountain, and I helped build this multi-billion-dollar company, and I helped rescue this many children from slavery. Which of them matters at all? He said, you're right, Paul. He said, if your persona, if your skill sets, if that's something they need, he said, I support you. I understand you need to go. I said, even if I can only rescue one child, it would be worth it, right? And so 2 days later, I'm in Colombia, face to face with people sending me children. The interesting thing about it, Michael, was I thought, okay, these guys are going to have, tattoos down their neck and 3 earrings in their noses. That's the look. And the first trafficker I met was a business owner. He was clean cut. He had a polo shirt, clean shaven. The second I met was a beautiful woman that worked with a modeling agency. I thought, these guys aren't traffickers.
Just were they married?
No, no, they were there working together with different,
But I'm saying neither one of them had a family.
no, but yes, the businessman did.
He did.
In fact, what was interesting is between the time that I first met him and that when the sting went down just a few weeks later, I was texting back and forth with him to make sure that he was bringing, all of his inventory, et cetera, for me to make sure he had so we could rescue him, right? And one of my texts with him, and I talk about this in the Sound of Freedom book that's coming out. He sends me a picture of him with his 3-year-old daughter in his back seat. Now, he wasn't trafficking her yet, but over time, most of these traffickers end up trafficking kids.
Trafficking his own daughter?
Absolutely. So many times these traffickers end up trafficking their own kids when they get older.
Wow.
He wasn't trafficking her yet, but what he said, this was so interesting. He said, he sent me a text and he said, after he had sent me that picture, and I was just appalled, and he said, Pablo, they called me Pablo. He said, Pablo, he said, I'm showing you my picture of her so you know why I'm doing all of this. I want to buy her Ferraris and make all this money for her. He said, I believe that God sent you to me.
Oh my God.
And what was going through my head is, you're right. God did send me.
Yeah.
Right? So I can make sure that child in your back seat never has to go through what these children are that you're trying today.
Did you tell him that?
No, of course I didn't.
Later on? My gosh. What kind of people are these? They got children and they're going to try other children, maybe their own.
Well, and
I'll tell you what we would have done with them. I don't know if you know my background.
Oh yeah, I do know your background,
yeah.
and that's what I felt I wanted to do.
Gone.
I was that very first meeting with these guys. I'm sitting there. I've got a Navy SEAL that's standing behind me. He's my real bodyguard and my show bodyguard, right? And he's standing behind me, and one of the truckers leans forward and he goes, Pablo, he said, I have a gift for you. I said, really, what's your gift? This is our very first meeting where we're negotiating this party. I'm telling him, listen, I'm willing to fund your project under one condition. We're going to have a party in about a week. You're going to bring all your existing inventory. If I'm happy with what I see, I'll fund your resort. We had to get him to bring all of their children to one place at one time so we could rescue them.
So did he think you were buying them for your own personal use, whatever you were going to do?
I told him I was giving him $500 per child just for 2 hours in the afternoon with him. That's why I was paying him, right? But really, it was just so that we could get him to call the other truckers, get them to bring all the children together.
That was a scene in the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And so he was so excited I was willing to do that. He says, I have a gift for you. I said, really, what's your gift? And he hands me his phone. And there's a picture of an 11-year-old girl on his phone. He said, this is Princess. She's still a... He said, he started talking about horrific things I could do to this little girl. And I thought, oh my God, I said, if we could help rescue these kids before they're ever trafficked in the first place, that would be a miracle. And then something he said made me realize he had more than her. I said, Fuego, I said, you say you just took delivery of some? I said, you have more virgins? He goes, oh yeah, I got 3 or 4 more. I said, you're bringing those to my party too, right? He goes, oh no. He says, they're too expensive. I said, too expensive? I'm already paying this guy $25,000. I'm paying him $500 per child just for that time. I said, he said, Jefe, you already paid $25,000. He said, you want to, those other virgins, it's going to cost you maybe $2,000, maybe $5,000 for that little one. It's going to cost you maybe $10,000 more. Now at this point, Michael, I am legitimately pissed. No acting involved. He's talking about these children like they're commodities. I've got my really nice suit, $50,000 watch. I put my hands on my chest and I said, you don't think I can afford an extra $10,000? He said, oh no, Jefe, no. I said, I want every one of those virgins at my party. I said, they damn well better be virgins when they get there. They're not for you. They're for me. You understand? He goes, oh yeah, Jefe, I understand. This stupid smile on his face. Now, the Navy SEAL that was behind me cleared his throat and he was I didn't check out the restaurant, make sure everything is safe. Later in debriefing, he said, you know what? He says, that little girl on that phone looked like my daughter at home. He said, I almost unholstered my weapon and shot him right there.
Probably had all to do to hold back.
Yeah. He says, but I knew if I did, he said, we would lose all those other kids. And now in the movie, My character is Pablo Delgado, the billion-dollar fund manager who quits his job to go rescue
this movie
kids.
originated with all of what you've done?
In the Sound of Freedom movie,
Yeah.
we took 8 different rescue missions and put them all together into one storyline. So we kind of put a lot of attention on Jim Caviezel's character. The truth is there was a lot of other operators that did some of those things. We just put all those stories together, right? And the truth is, and you read about this in the Sound of Freedom book, where the jungle was not even in Colombia. That was in Haiti. That was looking for a little boy, not a little girl. There was, a lot of other operators went in dressed as doctors on different operations, etc. But the story, all those stories really happened. They just didn't happen as we showed it in the movie. But that first rescue mission, the Jim Caviezel's like, only way I can pull this off is if I can convince Pablo to help fund it and be down here. Well, I'm Pablo in real life. I was running a multi-billion-dollar investment fund. I had a special set of skills from a previous life that makes me somewhat safe in a dangerous place. I was a rich playboy full of ego and pride and arrogance and lust. That's what the were looking for, right? And so and in the movie, Jim Caviezel's like, he gives a picture of this 11-year-old girl to my driver, and that's what convinced me to go. In real life, I was already there. I was face to face with these traffickers, but him showing me the picture of that 11-year-old galvanized my commitment to help fund this, whatever I needed to do. Now, fast forward 2 weeks later, we're at this island. The traffickers brought 54 children. Now, we had 3 separate cities at the same time, a total of over 120 children that were at these 3 separate cities with these simultaneous operations going on. I was there in Cartagena. We're sitting there at this island. These guys bring 54 children. Almost every one of them were under the age of 16 years old. Some of them were from other countries. We put them in a separate place of the house because they're already traumatized enough. We don't want them seeing the guns and the money changing hands, etc. I'm sitting there on this chair, negotiating with these traffickers on their business plan. Hidden cameras capturing our entire conversation so they couldn't come out later and say, oh, I thought the kids were coming to a pool party. No, you said exactly why she was there, exactly what she was willing to do. And this was a dark conversation, probably even too dark for your audience. This was a dark conversation talking about exactly what they do to these children, what they're willing to do, what they're paying them, everything, what they're forcing them to do, etc. And so, and then halfway through this meeting, one of the traffickers gets up and he said, Pablo, I have to show you the gifts that I brought you. This is the moment that changed my life. He went in the house where the children are. He was there for about 10 minutes, and we could hear some of the children cry. They were so scared of coming out and meeting the men who were supposed to tell them, right? And pretty soon they came out, and they had 4 scared to death. They had 3 little girls.
Old.
And 1 little boy. This little boy was 11. He was taken from Haiti. He was given cocaine that morning because he was so scared it was going to hurt. I mean, what kind of monster thinks that that's attractive? Every cell in my body wanted to just hug these kids and say, you're going to be fine. You're going to see your parents again. I couldn't say that. And I'm sitting on this chair and they bring these girls out. And this little boy. And one of the girls was the same one he showed me on that picture. And she's standing in front of me, and she had red hair with braids down the back. Her shirt had a little kitty cat on it. She was 11. And her face had makeup on it that had been smeared. She had been crying. She was so scared of this moment. She thought that this was it. And everything in me wanted to just say, no, it's not going to happen. You're going to be fine. You're going to see your parents. I couldn't say that. I took her little hands. I'm sitting down. She's standing up, and we're eye level. And I said to her, I said, ¿Cómo te llamas? What's your name? And she didn't answer. It's because her real name probably wasn't Princess, right? She was trying to figure out what the traffickers wanted her to say. And I just said, está bien. It's okay. I couldn't blow our covers. The agents hadn't come to arrest everybody. We were still sitting there in the middle of all these traffickers. And I said to the I said, it's not time for the party to start. There was a delay. The delay in the movie wasn't because all the kids were there. They were already there. The delay was because some of the child protective services people weren't there with the kids. And so I said, take them back in. We still need to negotiate our deal. And I'm trying to figure out how to delay so that they're not having these kids come out and be traumatized like that. And I said, you know what? I said, you've just proven to me that you could do what you said you would do. This is the inventory you said you had. I said, why don't you bring out these kids, you bring out this, I'm gonna have a great time. I'm gonna be fucked up for the next few days. Why don't we pencil our deal right now? I was simply trying to delay until the agents came. I had to bring out a notebook and a pen, and I started taking notes about a business plan. And I had negotiated hundreds of business plans in my career. This was second nature to me. But this one was like no other. When the inventory, when the product is children, the conversation gets really, really dark, really quickly. And I was delaying with this. Finally, the agent still hadn't come. And I said, I had this one last stroke of genius, really was God just saying, Paul, this is what you should say. I said, you know what? I said, and the conversation had gotten so dark that I couldn't even breathe because of what they were talking about. It was literally a business plan about what you do to the kids and where you get them and how you, all of this stuff. And I couldn't even breathe. It was getting so dark. So I said, guys, I'm willing to do this.
And they were allegedly renting them to you for a couple hours.
Yeah.
That's all this was.
Yeah, that's all it was. But it was for the purpose of me funding this resort for them so they can build out this business. And I said, look, you've proven to me all this stuff. You brought the inventory. You brought what we were looking for. I said, I'm willing to do this. I said, but I want 55%. You guys take the other 45. And I said, I looked at this Edouard guy. I said, you're providing the land and you put most of this together. I think you should get 30%. The rest of them can split 15%. There was a bunch of other traffickers there, and they started arguing. I thought, oh, good. We can stop talking about this business plan for a minute. And they started yelling at each other. I said, you know what, you guys figure out what that's going to be. And we'll put it here. And it was an argument for almost 10 minutes. Finally, boom, the agents came, stormed the island, arrested everybody, us included. Bad guys think that we got extradited to the U.S. to stand trial. And at that point, they had taken the traffickers off. We were laying there in the sand. I went into this other part of the house where I could get my bags and stuff. And at that point, the Child Protective Services people were in with the children. And to calm them down, they were laughing and singing with the children. And compared to the I heard half an hour before, that laughing and singing, that sound of freedom was the most beautiful sound that I ever heard. And I started crying. I turned to the agent that was with me. I said, bro, I spent my whole life making money, making rich people richer. I want to make a difference. I had a Lamborghini Aventador that I was going to buy that spring. I said, I'm not going to buy that car. I want to write the check instead. I said, what do you need? And he said, Paul, I can't teach my Navy SEALs how to wear a $50,000 watch to negotiate a deal like this. He said, sadly, it's guys like you who are the demand. He says, it's the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world, guys with big egos and big money and lust and greed. He says, don't take it wrong, but you're exactly what they're looking for. He says, if you're willing to be the bait, I'll change your whole life.
And who is this that said that?
This was one of the operators.
One of the
out there. One of the whole list.
Let me ask you this, though. They take the kids. Do they bring them back to their parents?
Depends.
And who's to say that they don't get tried again?
They're getting tried. Well, see, that's the problem. In Southeast Asia, in Thailand, more than half the children that we rescued were sold by their own families. You can't put them back in that situation. I was in Thailand just a few months ago, working with one of our sister foundations, with the Child Liberation Foundation. We had some others over there working with, and one of them, there was a family there that the mom wasn't working, the dad wasn't working. You know why? Because the 10-year-old could make more money if they were selling her in the brothel, and they figured she could be the breadwinner for the family. They could just sit at home.
Okay, what kind of people are these? God. And you mentioned all these other countries, South America and all these other countries, does any of this originate in the United States?
A lot of it does.
Originates. In other
Yeah.
words, families here are selling their children or
Yeah.
letting their children go
Absolutely.
in the States.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is why it's so important that you have a relationship with your kids where they tell you when Uncle Harry's touching them or the babysitter's showing them porn or the neighbor's friend, his old brother is taking pictures of whatever. This happens all the time. And there's things in the US that the parents need to be aware of that you would call it sex online, where you might have a 13-year-old daughter in your home and she's online, she's chatting, thinking that she's with another 13-year-old boy. He's got pictures of him and he sends a picture of himself and now send me one of you. Well, it's not a 13-year-old boy, it's a 38-year-old dude, right? And boom, she sends something and then he uses that as a manipulation, needs more, all the way to the point where if you don't do this, I'm going to send this all over your school. And she's in this situation where she's either going to commit or she needs to tell you as a parent. So you need to be her 911 and say, listen, I don't care if you did some stupid shit. You come to me if somebody's ever trying to put you in this situation, because it's happening a lot. And they're pushing it to the point where they're saying, okay, now you need to meet at this place after school every day.
And there's really no way legally to control this. It has to be controlled from within the home because legally, I mean, this is going to continue online. There's no way to stop it.
Well, and here's something that's an interesting legal twist is there are apps called new apps. Yeah, there are different types of new apps that, and guys on this thing don't get any ideas because you're going to lose your family and you'll go to jail. If you try to nudify a child, that is child porn that you've created, right? Mm-hmm. But indeed, these apps, this AI is incredibly good at you can take a celebrity and boom, take the clothes off that picture. Really? And it looks incredibly realistic. And so some predators are using this on your 14-year-old. She may not have any pictures anywhere. She's never done any with anybody. But if her social media is wide open and you haven't controlled it, in my opinion, if you've got a 14-year-old, she's welcome to have a social media with friends only seeing her, that isn't open to the general public. But let's say that it's open and you've got predators that are looking at your 14-year-old. They could literally take her picture off of the internet. Boom, use this app, take off her clothes. Boom, send her an email or a text from an anonymous text saying, this is what I have of you. If you don't want it all over the school, you're going to send me some more, or you're going to do this, etc. This is happening a lot.
And these people get off on seeing a picture of a 12-year-old.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right, let me ask you this. Back to the movie Sound of Freedom. I know you were the main financer of the movie.
I was the primary investor. So I was the first money in. We got some bigger ones that came later, which included the Carlos Slim family, the Walmart family, and the DiGiorgio family. But I was the very first money in. I funded it all up until production.
But did it originate from you? Did you create?
No, there was a lot of operators, including the Homeland Security agent that had first called me. Mm-hmm. That we went into Sony and Lionsgate and Paramount with the story. I went mm-hmm. with him on those. Mm-hmm. They wanted to do something with it, but they wanted full control over it. They wanted to have the control where they could have put my character and Jim Caviezel in a gay scene in the middle of the movie, and we couldn't do anything about it. Right? We wanted to have the right message out there, and so the entire script was written at my family cabin. We brought in these guys. In fact, I was the one that originally found the producer and director. I was at a Grammys after party here in Los Angeles. It was mm-hmm. a Rock Against Child. I talk about this in the Sound of Freedom book too, and details of how it all came about. The Rock Against Child. I had Pierce Brosnan was there, the former president of Mexico was there, a bunch of others, and one of them was Eduardo Verástegui. Eduardo now plays me in the movie. He's the mm-hmm. producer of Sound of Freedom. He's the Mexican actor, and he had just finished a movie called Little Boy. It's about faith. It's a beautifully done film, taking a delicate subject and just doing a beautiful job on it. And I met him there. I previewed that movie. I thought, these are the guys. We called them, our Mexico team. Mm-hmm. And so I brought them in and then introduced them to that Homeland Security agent. We talked about that and a bunch of other rescue missions, brought them into our cabin, had them there for a week or two just to write all the script of it, and off to the races.
So you were the major force in developing the project.
I was a big part of that. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. I was.
And Jim, how'd you get to Jim? Was he something you had in your head? Right
No,
away?
no, no. We actually had, we put the script out to Hugh Jackman,
Mm-hmm.
out to, we had a handful of other actors that
Mm-hmm.
actually turned us down in the beginning.
Really?
I think now they're looking back going, oh, we should have done
Yeah.
something there. But Jim, we were in New York and at the Phantom of the Opera. And one of the main actors in Phantom of the Opera in the Broadway in New York was friends with Jim. And we had some conversations with him, myself, some of the other operators, and he said I can get this in front of Caviezel, and it was a perfect fit.
Yeah.
You know,
He did a
Jim
great job.
Jim did a fantastic job.
I'd love
You
to
know,
sit with him, by the way. If you ever happen to talk to him, it'd be great. Even because of, the movie Passion of the Christ. He was so great.
such a good job.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's really interesting. Let me go back a little bit about you personally. Very wealthy guy, a lot of success, billions, airplanes. I can relate a little bit, not to your extent, but I did okay at one point in time. And you said ego and all this kind of stuff that goes with the money, and then something happened along with this mission that you were on with the children, and it was kind of a personal transformation. Explain that.
This is it's gonna rock everybody's boat here.
Let's
This
do
is
it.
powerful. So, um, it was almost 2 years into undercover work, and I was there as this wealthy playboy, and we were bringing in traffickers because I was that energy. I was never doing anything illegal or never attracted to minors, but I was filled with lust and envy and greed and whatever, and I had two. We were blowing through our undercover operators. I had Green Berets with 300 missions in Afghanistan, the Middle East, and one. They already had some PTSD, but one mission with me undercover to find children and sing a menu with what the children would do. They're just they blew them. So we were losing
So
operators.
when you say menu, what children would do, did they actually describe what activity these children
Yeah,
would
yeah. They would
perform?
have a picture of the child. They would say, okay, if you want, if you want, if you want, and if you want whatever, and what the prices were on all of that. Yeah. So just that what they call them menus. They go through the pages and stuff. And so, I had Green Berets, big tough, seeing the darkest part of everything, seeing that, and they're like, I can't. They couldn't survive it.
I don't know, Paul. Every conversation I've ever had in my life, this has got to be like I can't. It blows your mind. It really does. I could imagine. I can't even imagine. I don't know if I could have done what you've done. I mean, thinking, okay, I got to rescue these kids, and I understand that's what your whole focus was. But God, to be able to sit there with these animals,
It
freaking
was
animals.
it was horrific, and it created a lot of extra trauma for me
Oh,
and my
absolutely.
operators. Andy had done 22 missions with me. Jimmy had done 13.
How many did you do altogether?
I did over 70.
Wow.
Yeah, I did over 70 missions in 15 countries over a period of 10 years. And Andy and Jimmy together called me. And they said, Paul, do you trust us? And I said, yeah, I literally trust him with my life. I undercover, I'm in charge of talking. They're in charge of making sure I don't die.
Mhm.
Right. And I said, yeah, I trust you with my life. They said, you need to come to this healing retreat. I said, I don't need to heal. I'm Paul fucking Hutchinson. Everybody wants to be me. They said, no, you're in your second marriage, headed for a divorce. Your kids don't talk to you. You think that, your happiness is going to come from these parties and the girls and everything else. They said, you need to heal. And they said, this will be the most transformational experience of your life. And I said, no, that's saying something. I know Tony Robbins personally. I literally have walked across coals with him right there by my side, right? I've done transformational things. You can't tell me that this is going to be the most transformational experience of my life. They said, yeah, this doctor helps people break through anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions, childhood trauma within very short period of time, like a matter of days. And I said, now I'm calling BS on that. I said, I don't know if you know this, but my early 20s, my first successful company, I sold at 29 years old. I sold it for $20 million. Now, most of it was restricted stock, but that was a lot of money at that age. And that's what we did. I had 50,000 people a month calling in off of infomercial to get help with these things. We had a cognitive restructuring program that took us 12 weeks with a personal coach, 1 to 2 hours a day, to help people break free of debilitating anxiety, depression. You can't tell me that you can get this done in a few days. You just can't do it. And then they said, well, she is a master at the proper use of psychedelics. And I'm like, well, now you're off the, because I grew up in a community in Utah where we couldn't drink alcohol, tea, tobacco, anything like that. So, and for sure, if it was a Schedule I drug, I was under the impression that things like psilocybin were more dangerous than cocaine. The truth is, psilocybin in mushrooms is safer than table sugar.
Really?
There's never, ever been a case of addiction. There's never been a case of overdose. And when used properly with a trained facilitator, can create more long-term change in a matter of days than 10 or 20 years worth of therapy. And here's the reason behind it. I have now become a master facilitator. I have hosted and facilitated almost 80 guided meditation, plant medicine healing experiences over the last 8 years since then, right?
Is that what you call it? What would you call this?
I call them retreats or journeys, right? What some people do, but we don't just do a one-night journey. We do a 7-day, fully immersive transformational experience. And because we can't do them in the US, they're still illegal here. Eventually, they're going to decriminalize them here. So we're doing them in South America. And so what happened to me on that first experience, Michael, it was the most beautiful, horrific experience of my life. Horrific because what the medicine did for me is it took me into a state of pure empathy. I felt in every cell of my body, I could feel the pain that my children felt when I cheated on their mom. And it was so dark and it was so heavy. And then I could feel the joy of the children that we had rescued and back to their parents, as if I was them. It was so beautiful. And then I felt the pain of the family that I broke apart because some guy was at my party and slept with a cheerleader, and now he broke up his marriage. And the ripple effect of my words and my actions on all of humanity, and anything that I did, I could feel as if I was them. And it was so transformative for me. And then is what happened. The facilitator. Now, what happens is your mind is in a state of neuroplasticity, similar to for about 6 hours.
That long?
Yeah, for about 6 hours. Now, this is a ceremonial dose. This is something where you need help to go to the bathroom type thing, right? And but neuroplasticity is what happens when you're a child. When you're 3 and 4 years old, you can learn 3 or 4 languages at the same time. You're very, very impressionable, and you're creating new neural pathways. So the psilocybin creates a temporary state of neuroplasticity, which is very impressionable, which is why it's incredibly dangerous to go to a rave party and go get high with your friends. Because if you're in a state of neuroplasticity and there's rap music going over here and an orgy going over here and somebody yelling at their wife over here, you're in this state of hyper sensitivity where things get impressioned into your subconscious mind. Well, as a child at 3, 4, 5 years old, in that state of neuroplasticity, if you get abused by an uncle or whatever, a lot of times that goes into your subconscious and it sticks there and you don't even remember it. Yet it's guiding your life in anger, low self-esteem, anxiety, depression, addictions, etc. And so imagine that that's something that's stuck in this hardened concrete. You can't break it out of that subconscious mind. But what if you could take that hardened concrete and turn it back into liquid for 6 hours? Right? That neuroplasticity state, you can then go in and work on this childhood trauma, work on these negative habit patterns of thought and worry and what if thinking and negative expectations or anger issues, all of these things. If you have a trained facilitator in that neuroplasticity state, you can create miraculous changes in overcoming anxiety, addictions. We have over an 85% success rate. using psychedelics and helping people with cocaine and heroin addictions to be able to overcome those addictions with no relapses.
Really?
Which is incredibly powerful. And so Johns Hopkins University is now putting out a lot of new studies on the proper use, facilitated use of psychedelics in trauma therapy, in anxiety and depression, PTSD, addictions, etc. And the sad thing is that most of us, if we were born any time in the 60s or thereafter, our entire life, we've been taught that these things are incredibly dangerous.
Yes.
Right? So if you look at a chart and you go on the internet and you type in dangers of alcohol versus psilocybin, one of the pictures you'll get is a chart where it has the most dangerous. It has all these things, every single mind-altering thing, everything from cannabis to cocaine to heroin and everything in between. The most dangerous of all of them, dangerous to self and dangerous to other, the most dangerous of all of them is alcohol.
Really?
Second is crack cocaine. Third is heroin. Fourth is regular cocaine. All the way down at the bottom, very, very bottom with almost zero harm to self and others is psilocybin. Because there's never been a case of addiction or overdose. But when used with a trained facilitator, that neuroplasticity state creates a place where you can then take some real deep internal looks of how you're showing up in the world. And one of the things for me, which was, since we talked a little bit about our faith in Christ, the facilitator, knowing that I had left the religion of my youth about 15 years before, knew that one of my intentions was to rebuild that relationship with God. And so, after I had that experience of feeling that pain and that joy, whatever, and that empathy, I was talking with a facilitator. Now I'm in this beautiful heart-opening space, and I pointed at this statue that I had of Atlas holding the world on his shoulders. And I said, I feel a lot like Atlas. I've got 4,000 employees. I feel the world on my shoulders, but look, God has made me so strong with my, and I had Zeus and Poseidon on either side of him on these statues. And I says, I feel like, those are protecting Atlas because he's holding the world. And the facilitator let me talk. And then she said, Paul, I admire the fact that you're seeing some of those traits in yourself of those Greek gods, but you know as well as I do that those were mythological gods. She said, what about your relationship with him? And she points at a statue of Christ that I had. And I said, oh, I don't qualify for a relationship with him. And
is this like a truth serum? Does it act like a truth serum?
In a way, you remember everything. You're not going to say stupid things that you don't know you're going to say. You're not going to go shit yourself. You're not going to, whatever. But you're in a very open-hearted, honest space where you can take a real honest look at yourself. And so that honest look at myself, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't qualify for a relationship with him. And she said, well, why not? I said, well, when I left the church of my youth, I was told by my bishop that until I was rebaptized in that church, I wouldn't have the Spirit of Christ with me. And she said, do you really think that that's true? And I said, well, no. I said, when I do these undercover missions, I feel led. I feel guided to where these kids are. I truly feel that blessing of God in that space. And she said, well, why don't you work on that relationship? So here I am on mushrooms. I can barely walk, and I'm reaching up to try and get the statue off the mantle. And she says, let me help you, Paul. And she helps bring it down. And I sat on the beanbag and held that statue for the next 2 hours and had the most beautiful, healing conversation with my brother.
Wow.
In that state. And it was incredibly healing for me. And so, fast forward, we now run these retreats.
And you actually have a facility?
We have a facility. We bought a place in Latin America where people come in for fully immersive, transformational healing experiences. People can learn more about it on the Liberating Humanity website, where you can learn. And I would encourage everybody to do their own research. You can go do the research on the Johns Hopkins studies, etc., on the proper use, and have a facilitator who understands breath work and meditation to help you break through.
That facilitator is obviously trained.
Yes. Yeah. And we do training for facilitators down there at the property.
People from all over the world are coming here now.
We do. My primary focus in the ones that I'm a part of are royalty and world leaders and billionaire families. I bring them what I call the tip of the umbrella influencers, because if I can help them, I have a lot of big podcasters even come in. If I can help them release those heavy traumas that are still, skeletons in their closet, if I can help them find a way to lead from a place of the heart, if I can help mend their relationship with their spouse, with their children, if I can help them break free of the addictions that are still lingering in their lives, if I can do that, then that tip of the umbrella aspect, it rains down and it spreads out to thousands and thousands of others.
Well, do you find that these type of issues are prevalent with people, wealthy people in power?
Everybody's got problems. They don't like, I will say that there's a special new set of problems when you've got wealth and power and money that adds to ego and greed and lust. But sadly, almost everybody deals with anxiety, depression, addictions. I bring guys into my retreats and I say, guys, I'm just going to tell you right now, I already know y'all. You don't even have to tell me. Over 90% of you either currently has or within the last 2 years has had an addiction to pornography. Most of you aren't even telling your wife about it. That's okay. We're going to fix it today, right? Wow. We're going to work on that. We're going to take you into this state of neuroplasticity. We're going to help you really feel the pain that you're causing your family, even if you think it's a victimless crime. The fact that it's taking away from your ability to truly show up energetically, emotionally, and intimately with your spouse, it's affecting her. And you're going to go into a place where you're going to feel that as if you're her, and it's going to hurt, but I'm going to help you break through those addictive behaviors. So
is it mostly men that you're treating?
It's men that we help. What we do in that section, we'll take the men and the women apart, and I sit down with the men and I talk to them about their problems with their addictions, and the gals will talk to the women about their problems with anxiety and depression, and how their their perfectionist stuff. There's a lot of issues that they deal with separate from us, and then we put them into this experience and work with them for the next few days.
Wow. Amazing. Well, let me ask you this: the movie Sound of Freedom, brilliant. Obviously, you played a huge role, like we discussed. Now you have a book coming out, Sound of Freedom.
Yeah.
I expected it would be much more detailed, a lot more information, and this is coming from you. You're the author.
Yes.
Correct? Want to tell us a little bit about it?
Well, the movie, you go to the movie, it is simply there to create awareness, right? But you come away from it without a lot of tools as a husband, as a father, as a mother. And so the Sound of Freedom book, there's 4 different sections. The first section, the first 4 or 5 chapters, is titled the Making of an Undercover Operator, but it talks about learning situational awareness and hand-to-hand combat and the charity side of things and all of these things. And there's a lot of information in there that parents can use to keep their kids safe, because these were the things that I learned that kept us safe in a dangerous place. So that's to keep them safe in a dangerous place. And then, of course, the next section is all about the rescue mission in Colombia, the island, and lots of details there, but a lot more in terms of the emotional transformation that I went through in seeing that and what motivated me to come to this new place in my life. And then the third section is about the doctors in a jungle, talking about the details of that. And then the last section is all on healing humanity. Now I have your attention. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about, how do we heal through this? How do we identify, you talked about earlier, how do I identify when this stuff is going on? Very clear things that you as a parent can look for to identify when these challenges are happening, when your child might be in danger, or whatever else, and how to help them heal. Because again, if you've got a deep wound and it's getting infected, if you can clear that out immediately, yeah, you might have a scar, but you can fix it. Right. If you don't, If you cover it up and say, that child's told don't talk about this and whatever, and you hold that down and you don't get them the love, the help, the healing that they need, then it comes out many years down the road, and anxiety and depression and addictions and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, the book, I'm sure, is going to go out to the general public, but I think the Attorney General and people in power should see this too, because it'll probably be a Bible as to how to deal with this.
Yeah.
Both in a mission, standpoint, and also if you've been a victim of this and how to prevent it.
Yes.
I'll tell you, Paul, it's I don't know if I've ever had a conversation like this before. I really mean it. It's horrific. What you're doing is obviously extremely admirable and necessary, and as parent, I appreciate it. As a human being, I appreciate it, and I know my audience will.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to add to that? I mean, really amazing.
I'm incredibly grateful. And I think it's important to understand that, back at the time of Abraham Lincoln, it wasn't the guys rescuing the slaves that created the biggest difference. It was people like you. It was the influencers. It was people like Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was the podcasts of the age, right? It was the media of the age. And it created an awareness with good people of what was going on in the South. In fact, years later, when Abraham Lincoln met Harriet, he shook her hand. He said, "So you're the little lady that wrote the book that started the big war." And so today it is people like you who have worked hard to create an audience of good people that want to see the dark and the light. They want to be aware so that they can live a better life, so they can create a better life for their children. And the fact that you have brought me into your space with the audience that you have worked so hard to put together and trusted me with this microphone here is you are making as big of a difference as my operators who were physically there on the ground. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm so grateful for this time together with you and your audience today.
Well, Paul, thank you for that. And believe me, I appreciate everything that you're doing. And, if I can even play a small part in helping you with any of these children, I'd be happy to do it. I mean, my whole family would be behind this, without a doubt.
Well, thank you.
So thank you very much for coming on, and hopefully we'll stay in touch. And I want the first copy of the book. The other book, too.
The other one there, Conscious Capitalism. Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. Well, people, there you have it. I mean, after listening to Paul, I don't even know how to respond to that. What a sickening, immoral, demonic thing it is for people in power to want to have sex with these young kids. You see the movie Sound of Freedom, and Paul really brings it to life. It's sickening. What is wrong with these people that they want to abuse children like that? And let me tell you something. You know what? Biden and that administration prior to Trump here now, they have to answer for this. 300,000 children were brought across the border. He told you how they were trafficked. They were giving a name and an address and a number of people that they were supposed to report to. And then after 2 weeks, they run away and they go to where they're human trafficked. How demonic is that? I mean, the things that he told me got me sick. I mean, my wife saw it, there was tears in her eyes. How do you do this to young kids? It's horrible, people. I don't know what's going on in this world. Powerful people, that have wealth, that abuse children like this. I'm telling you, lock them up. Throw the key away for them. I really mean it. How do you do something like this? As a father and a grandfather and just a human being, how do you let this stuff happen? But you know what? We got to give thanks to Paul because he led the charge for over 10 years and he's still continuing to do it. You see how it happened. He got a call from, I think, the Attorney General of his state and asked him to go and help. And that undercover operation, if you see how it worked in Sound of Freedom, and he really, laid it out, amazing. And the poor guy, he was getting sick. They give you a menu with actual things that you could do to children. I'm telling you, these people, if we ever caught them on the street back in the day, you don't want to know what would happen to them. They go into prison, you're a pedophile, you're in trouble. And rightfully so. I mean, this is horrible stuff that they're doing, people. I'm going to have Paul back on again when his book comes out. We want to talk about it because he's going to get into detail. Comes out on July 29th, so watch for it. But I'm going to bring Paul back at that time, and I want him to get into greater detail about some of the things that, and the undercover operations that he had rescuing these kids. I want him to get into detail and talk about it, create awareness for this, because we need to do something about it. When I think back, how many kids crossed our border, we don't even know. These human traffickers, they're smart. They knew how to do it with these open borders. And of course, not only here, but it's happening all over the world. It's disgusting, I have to tell you. And I pray to God that we get a handle on this and there are more people like Paul. You know what? We owe him a great deal of service. He was terrific, and I mean that. And anyway, I can support him. I will. And I think we all should do that. So, people, that's it for today. How do I always leave you? Same way. It's not going to change. Be safe. Let's make our children safe, no matter where they are, what country they are, what part of the world they are. Let's pray that we can make our children safe from people that Paul described, these horrible human beings that would abuse children for money. Sometimes the parents are doing it with their kids. They earn more money than they do going to work, so they put their kids out there. Disgusting. Disgusting. So, be safe, be healthy. What could I say? That I preach it all the time. And yes, I really mean this. God, I'm even at a loss for words after speaking with him. God bless each and every one of you. God bless your children. Of course, your families, your children, your grandchildren. God bless your communities, your neighborhoods, and everybody that you know. And yes, God bless America. Yes, I'll see you next time. Take care.